I grew up under the apartheid time. Now, I guess it depends on what lens you look through at South Africa. But, in some of my encounters with people, I got a very skewed view of how they saw South Africa versus the reality of the South Africa that I lived in.
I mean, this could be a difficult situation, especially if you are confronted with an immigrant and you want to help them.
No, I don't think that there's anything in the Immigration Nationality Act that deputizes you or any other citizen to report anyone that you perceive to be here unlawful. I think we're all part of a bigger humanity, and you take care of your neighbor irrespective of what the color of his skin is, what his accent is.
Thank you, everybody, for coming today. As David mentioned, I host a podcast called the About Our Father's Business podcast, and we release an episode every 2 weeks, and the whole goal of this was to share the gospel, speak the truth, and even more narrowly, from people that are leaders in the business world, because I think there's sometimes a misunderstanding or a misconception that business and Christianity doesn't go together, but everything's God's, and that includes our work, our businesses. It's all God's. So for me, as an entrepreneur, I've always been searching for kind of the people to look up to that were also solid Christians and they were pursuing business at the same time. So that's kind of how this started. So we are recording this, and it will be available as an official podcast episode. So let's get straight into it. Sir, thank you, Leon, for coming today for this show. We are going to start off with your accent. Where is your accent from?
Good afternoon, everybody. I have a southern accent, but it's not from Texas. It's a little bit further south from there. I'm originally from South Africa, where I grew up during the apartheid time, which was kind of an interesting time in the South African history, and has taught myself and the South African public quite a lot in getting through that time. I ultimately came to the United States in 1999, but I graduated. I went to law school in South Africa before I came over here.
So about how old were you when you came over here?
So that's a good question. There needs to be some math, and lawyers and math don't always jive. So I graduated high school. From there, I went to law school. In South Africa, they follow the old British common law, wherein you can, right in law school, determine if you're going to be a barrister or a solicitor. So the distinction between the two professions in the legal field is synonymous to if you go to your general practitioner. So say you, for instance, hurt your knee. You don't go to the orthopedic surgeon. You first go see your general practitioner. He does a diagnosis and a prognosis of things, and he say you may need surgery. Why don't you go see the orthopedic surgeon? So in similar like that, the Commonwealth countries like South Africa, England, Australia, even Canada, has this similar distinction in the legal profession. So you would go find, with your first legal problem, you'll first go see the attorney, your general attorney. They'll do a prognosis and a diagnosis of the legal issues. And when it gets litigated, it gets sent over to a barrister or advocate. So I was an advocate in South Africa. I practiced there for a very short period of time, doing exclusively litigation. So my clients, in fact, were not the public, it was actually lawyers. Lawyers would refer me business, and I would go litigate this stuff. Nothing complex, just something, as a junior advocate or barrister, you do some of the ex parte motions, and you do some easy cases, maybe one-day trials or something like that. My journey came to just kind of a pause while practicing, because one of my roommates, he was a pharmacist, and he said, "Hey, I'm immigrating to America." I said, "Well, that's fantastic." There was a huge shortage of, maybe still is, of pharmacists in the United States, and the old Osco drug hired quite a lot of foreigners to come and help out over here. So he immigrated here as a pharmacist. And I asked him, "So where are you going to go?" He says he's going to go to Kansas City. And I'm like, "Where is that?" And he said it's in the middle of the country. And I got figuring, okay, well, if it's in the middle of the country and he wants me to come visit, seems like a pretty good place to set your home base on if you want to go explore the United States, go east and west and south and north. Little did I know you need to fly to Ohio to go to Florida, but needless to say, so much for logic. During my time here visiting him in Kansas City, I put my practice on hold and got involved with some guys who plays rugby over here. So I had to go see this circus because rugby is one of the prominent sports in South Africa, just like football is over here. And they are the current world champions. And anyway, but I found some guys who play rugby, quite a few attorneys who also participated in the sport. And through there, rugby is probably one of the biggest fraternities that you'll find worldwide. You open your mouth anywhere in the world and you say you play rugby to among a couple of guys. And I mean, 5 beers later, he's talking about how to solve the world's problems, with a stranger that you've never met. But needless to say, that was kind of an in, and talking to some attorneys that kind of got me interested in the American legal system while I was over here.
So how was it living in South Africa?
So it was, like I say, I grew up under the apartheid time. Now, I have found from the different lenses, I guess it depends on what, lens you look through at South Africa. But, in some of my encounters with people, I got a very skewed view of how they saw South Africa versus the reality of the South Africa that I lived in. I think, the separateness is what the Afrikaans word is. Apartheid means separate. So you had the place where the whites would go use the restrooms, and the black place where the black would use the restrooms. And they were limited to voting. But there were some great leaders that took us out of that divisiveness through Nelson Mandela and F.W. de Klerk that kind of brought the country together. And there was really not, but for a couple of guys that, you would find who have still that heart of racism for the majority of the country, there wasn't really any racism that kind of remained. And that it was indicative of the fact that the only people who could vote on a yes and no was the white people. Yes, we're going to have a referendum on letting Nelson Mandela out and building a country where it's going to be a democracy, or no. And so all those people voted yes because that was the right thing to do. And so what really cemented, I think, the birth of the Rainbow Nation, as South Africa is called, is when we hosted the Rugby World Cup for the first time. So you can imagine what this place is like when Kansas City wins the Super Bowl, on how it brings everybody together and all celebrations. So you take rugby, which is something that the South African country takes a lot of pride in. You win a World Cup rugby, and you have someone like Nelson Mandela that brings all of that together and get that kick-started. There's a movie, I think it was called Invictus, that was made that kind of illustrates it at best on what happened there. But that was kind of the magic moment that kind of sparked, the future of South Africa after that. And it's been quite an adventure. Obviously, unfortunately, after that, I have left. So, I just kind of on second hand kind of hear on how things have grown and so on and so forth. But for me, South Africa was a great place. Not much different than that. I oftentimes tell people that we had the postman deliver the mail on an elephant, and the guy's like, really? I'm like, no. And in fact, I have found that there's more wildlife in my backyard here in Kansas City than in South Africa. And they're like, really? Like, yeah. So we don't live in the jungle. But anyway.
So were you attending church in South Africa, or
Yes.
is that where you gave your life to Christ?
Yes. I was brought up in a Christian family, and we went to church, charismatic church, and non-denominational. And at the ripe age of 8 years old, we were at a youth camp, and I really sensed the Holy Spirit pulling on my heartstrings at an invitation to make a turn. There's Christians that just goes to church and that's what they do, and they feel like that's all good to be a Christian. But like that youth minister said, you can go to McDonald's every Friday, but that doesn't mean that makes you a Big Mac. You really need to make that change and give your heart to God. And That change have from there kind of birthed where I was baptized afterwards, understanding the significance of laying your life down and coming up and turning the page and changing the mindset of being a follower of Jesus at that point in time. So I've been a Christian for a long time, it feels like.
So what led you to want to become an attorney?
That's a good question. So the funny thing is, so I went to in South Africa, or the schooling system back then, and was a little bit different than what it is now. But you were able to, the equivalent of kind of like an SAT, where depending on what your scores are, you had to have math, science, and 2 languages at least as a base, and you can really from there do anything. My trajectory was to become a civil engineer. I'd always had an interest in that. And here towards the end, I decided, well, look, I would like to actually work for as little as possible, for as much possible money, and kind of have a good life. Isn't that kind of the idea? So I looked around and I figured, the only kind of profession that I know that does that is a dentist. So I want to become a dentist out of nowhere. So all right, I got registered to go to dentistry school. Quickly realized in like maybe the first 2 weeks that this is not something that I'm going to be doing. Now, I've been told a long time, we do some of these evaluations. So I was on the debate team and I did quite a lot of other variety of things. And it's like, you'll be a good lawyer one day. I'm like, no, that doesn't match my objective. Lawyers need to, every time they get a case, they need to learn everything all over again because each case is so unique. So it doesn't stop the learning. And it seems like it's a lot of work. I don't know. The guys in South Africa, those lawyers, they don't get paid that much. It's not like, some of the lawyers over here, but they didn't quite match the mold. But in any event, and so after my encounter with the dentistry school, I was told that again. I was like, well, maybe I should give this a go. And I enrolled into law school and never really looked back after that. And it's really kind of, it seems like God says, go this way. I'm like, no. Jonah wants to go this way. And it's like, no, that's not good. I didn't end up in the belly of a whale, but thank God.
So what you're telling us is, that attorneys actually do work? I'm kidding. There's attorneys in the audience. I'm just kidding. It was a joke. I'm kidding. So, okay, you started out, you wanted to be an attorney, but then now you're an immigration attorney. What led to that?
That's the craziest thing. So I was in law school. I'll never forget this. We're in the first day of law school. Everybody wants to become an attorney. You've got the whole class on introduction of law. I don't know, 500 students or more. I don't know. It just like feels like. So the professor goes around and is like, what are you going to specialize in? I'm going to specialize in bankruptcy. It's like, what about you? I'm going to be a corporate lawyer, whatever that means. And this guy wants to be an international lawyer, whatever that means. But anyway, so he goes around and he basically made a point that day. And he said, look, it doesn't matter if you're the best bankruptcy lawyer. If you don't have clients, it doesn't matter if you're a best bankruptcy lawyer. You're going to be ultimately specializing in the field of law that clients want you to specialize in. And I went in here and I went out there. But today, looking back, I'm like, how would I ever end up from going to law school, litigating in South Africa, to coming to Kansas City, which I didn't know where it even existed on the map at some point, ignorantly wise, and ending up over here doing immigration. So it steered it away to a point where that practice gravitated towards immigration when I got here.
So how was the process for you with actually being an immigrant coming into America at that time?
So it was challenging, just like it is. It has its challenges as it does now. Part of my journey was to get a work authorization. There's a visa that is commonly used in the industry for specialized workers. It's called the H-1B visa. There's only a limited amount of these visas available. And, now for the past, I don't know how many years, they always run out of these visas. So thank goodness during the time when I was doing my application, I was able to be selected and got the specialty visa in order to work here in the United States. But that was only limited to practicing law in a clerical, like a paralegal, law clerk kind of capacity, not as a lawyer, right? Becoming a lawyer in the United States, I was sharing with some of my colleagues, most states require that you must have graduated from an accredited American law school in order to just be eligible to sit for the bar. So obviously I don't meet that criteria, and looking to find what it would take to be graduating from an accredited American law school, had a one with quite a few zeros behind it. And I was like, number one, I don't want to go back to law school again. And number two, it's a lot of money, I don't know, it's not going to be working out on my paralegal salary. So this lawyer that I was working with and that I was clerking with, he encouraged me to file a ex parte motion with the Missouri Supreme Court. And he said, your job is to go convince the Missouri Supreme Court that despite the requirement that you must have graduated from accredited American law school, that they should allow you to sit for the bar. And I said, well, that seems, number one, very challenging, because I don't know if it has been done at the time. But the argument that he kind of laid out was like, listen, for the visa application, I had to go convince immigration what the equivalent of my legal studies were, what the equivalent of that was. And it came out to be the equivalent of a JD plus 2 years of legal education. I'd been working with him for a while. So I took those elements to the Missouri Supreme Court, and basically the crux of the matter was saying, look, the South African legal system and the American legal system are all common law based. So it's not codified like you would have in Japan or Germany or France. So the principles are all the same. And I said, so I'm not asking you guys to just admit me as a lawyer because I think, I've got all this pedigree. I'm asking just for an opportunity to sit for the bar. Because there shouldn't be a distinction whether or not I graduated from Harvard, UMKC, or South Africa. The standard for the lawyers in Missouri is can you pass the Missouri bar? And that's all I'm asking for, an opportunity. So through God's favor, I must add, they granted my petition. So I still haven't graduated from an accredited American law school, but I've been practicing for over 20 years here in America. And that's what got me onto that journey.
Wow. A lot of people today, maybe not a lot, but definitely is going to be some people who would say our immigration process needs a little bit of reform. So if you were sitting before Congress, how would you advise them on the three most critical areas of change in that immigration process?
So, one administration will come after the other administration. I just saw a video of, I think it was Reagan and who he was running against back in the day for his second term, I think. And immigration was a topic. Immigration always seems to be utilized as a football when it comes up for an election, and it's really kind of a shame because you play with people's lives and their future and the aspirations that they have to come to a country that creates much better opportunity for the places where they come from. But I think one of the first things I would say, one of the easiest things that they can do is the kids who have been here, to figure out a way to make those kids legal. They didn't have a choice at the time when their parents brought them here illegally, and for them to have a better future. And they have been assimilated in the society now, have gone to our schools. They probably speak much better English than I do. And for them to now all of a sudden say, well, listen, because you didn't follow the rules, we need to deport you, I think is unconscionable. We don't even in the criminal justice system hold minors accountable for their actions. So this should be something that one would think logically should be very, very simple to do, but Congress has still failed to do that. There's been some temporary benefit given to them. And when the Obama administration came up with the DACA program, I said to some of the clients who comes like, I really want to do this DACA. And I said, listen, if you break down what DACA means, it means deferred action on childhood arrivals. And so I was always leery about that because it means that they are just deferring, taking action on your removability. And I'm not really comfortable with it, but we kind of arm wrestled and said, listen, I think, if you weigh the pros and the cons, at least it's some kind of a benefit. It doesn't give them status, which, status is something where I can say I'm legal here. DACA is just like, I'm not really legal here, but they're not going to kick me out right now. So it's kind of in between. That's one of the first things. The second thing I would think is that there is the specialty visa that I talked about, the H-1B. We do a great job in America in attracting the best of the best to come to our universities. And not only do they exceed in the expectations set at universities in America, probably still some of the best in the world, but not only do they exceed the expectations there and graduate in the top of their class for the most part, especially in the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics portion of things. Then what happens is when those student visas expire, the only natural flow from there is to go to this H-1B visa, which there's 65,000 available and there's 700,000 people applying. You go into the lottery system. It seems then silly for us to then all of these guys that we have basically trained who graduated from our universities that don't have any other option but to send these guys back to the countries where they came from. That doesn't make any sense. And now America has effectively trained the world competition to compete against us in science, technology, and engineering and mathematics. So that's definitely something that they can do about. And then the last thing I would say is that there is a limit on the amount of green cards that are being issued. These are per category, so family has a various different preference categories. So, you sponsor your brother and sister, or you sponsor, your unmarried child. And in the employment-based category, there are some of these guys that we sponsor who go through a process with the Department of Labor to show we can't find any U.S. citizen to do the job and ultimately get a green card. There are so many farmers that are left without any help that this green card process is taking now years and years and years. To add to that, the science, technology, and engineering and mathematics, they are now processed, I think it's 2012. It's taking an Indian national or Chinese national who has a master's degree from the United States over 12 to 15 years to get a green card. And then after that, it's still another 5 years before they become a citizen. So in the meantime, you still navigate, how do we keep these guys illegal? So the solution there is that Congress issues X amount of green cards every year, and whatever we don't use, it just goes away. Why not capture all of those that, they may not have been a specific category in family that used up all their green cards. Why can't we appropriate those to help with the backlog of the employment-based second preference category or something else? I mean, if they're going to issue X amount of green cards per year, just shove it out. It was like, okay, this category didn't use it all up. Let's maybe move it over to the other category and kind of keep things going. So we're not taking away, we're not adding. And if they do that, you will see that a lot of these categories will all of a sudden catch up. So those were the three things. The kids, I would say, that's easy. Adding to, it's something only Congress can do, and adding to the number of the H-1B visas, or come up with a different solution there to stop sending our trained people, educated people overseas. And last but not least, just kind of do something about this backlog on the green cards.
Do we have a problem at the border today?
They did at some point. So I think that's probably going to spill over here in the coming years. It just creates divisiveness, to my point earlier, when this kind of thing, this issue is unfortunately just being used as a football every time, and they play with people's lives. When you say, hey, it's okay so there's a stop sign, the law says stop at the stop sign. But when people in the community say, all right, I kind of stopped but didn't stop and then go over, and at some point everybody in the community understands, it's probably okay to just drive over. It didn't change the law, but it kind of creates this understanding that, well, yeah, even though it's law, it's not law. I think it's going to create an issue. And so, in the next couple of years as to what to do in helping those folks who, from a desperate level, have come to the United States to seek a better future, and kind of separating those from those people that we don't know who are here, who are wanting to do us harm because they've exploited this opportunity as well. Look, coming from Africa, I have seen people in great despair. I mean, what they have on the shirt on the back, that's it, what they have. I mean, if you were to say, hey, we're going to relocate, where's your bag? I don't need a bag. This is what I got. You've got a bottle of water and let's go. So people from all over the world, come over here for the most part for greater opportunity, and because of the great way America has always reached out to help the world. This is by far the country that is so generous, the most generous country in the world, and just how people reach out to those that are in need. That's quite amazing. It still blows me away. So it'll be interesting to see how they do that.
Where do you think that generosity came from?
I don't know. I mean, personally, I think it's because of what they have been given. Most of them are good stewards with regards to stewarding that to people who are in need. It's like, you know what? I have 2 phones. You don't have a phone. Let's share that with you. There's nobody that tells them you need to do it, because the Americans, because you don't tell them, hey, listen, if you got 2 phones, you got to give it to that guy. It's like, oh. Well, if you've got 2 phones, let me make that choice and let me feel generous. I think that's probably where the most of it comes from. You know, there's opportunities here that are here that you don't find other places because of corruption, because of how governments are structured, that limits people with opportunities. Over here, with unlimited opportunities that we have over here, I think that generosity helps us from a platform to help others that are in need.
How should Christians view and respond to immigration?
You know, it's so tough to do that if you turn on the television and there's always kind of, a divisive message that's being sent, whether or not it is through this political party or that political party or black. We're going to talk about race, which is probably the one way to stop talking about race that will get rid of racism. Is that what we learned in South Africa? But I think, as far as immigrants are concerned, I think we're all part of a bigger humanity, and you take care of your neighbor irrespective of what the color of his skin is, what his accent is, and do whatever you need to do. It's not in your hands as far as what the government needs to do vis-a-vis his status in the country, non-status in the country, and moving forward. I think as Christians, we are just led to love our neighbors as ourselves, and I think that's kind of just what we are commissioned to do.
So, I mean, if you watch the news today, it seems like we're getting invaded, like literally invaded by millions of people. Is that the case? Do we have that many illegal immigrants coming in and they're walking around in America today?
So I can just speak to what we have experienced in our office. We have seen some people who have come in, so it's always difficult to discern of what the media says and how they try to sensationalize things, but there is a crisis, in my opinion, because of the people that we see that come into our office who are in need of help. The Catholic charities are overwhelmed with regards to some immigrants and refugees that they need to help. All of these non-for-profits are overwhelmed. So it is an issue, and the only people who have the authority to do something about it is the federal government.
Mm-hmm. So as a believer, what are some of the practical things we could do to help the immigration issues today? I
think that one of the things is to treat them, love your neighbor as you just like God said. You gotta love God, and then you gotta love your neighbor like yourself. And I think that's really just where it stops, despite the divisiveness that there is, because that's pretty easy to do when you have that undertone of divisiveness that gets spewed over the TV all the time.
I mean, this could be a difficult situation, especially if you are confronted with an immigrant, right? And you want to help them. But at the same time, we're called to obey the government, which would mean, are we supposed to report them? Or are we supposed to house them? Right? So I think that's where some of that tension could lie for a Christian.
No, I don't think that there's anything in the Immigration Nationality Act that deputizes you or any other citizen to report anyone that you perceive to be here unlawful. So here's a for instance. I represented a company who was going through an audit. Sorry, just to divert you for a second. Company was going through an audit wherein all companies needs to fill out an I-9, right? And through the I-9, immigrations oftentimes use those I-9s to determine who's legal in the country, who's not. So in this criminal investigation that was going on, I talked to the U.S. attorney and who was prosecuting this case in federal court. And I said to this guy, I said, listen, you do realize that you can be illegal in the country and still have the authority to work. Or you can be legal in the country and not have the authorization to work. And that kind of threw him for a loop. It's like, hold on a second. I thought we were, because he keeps talking about we need to, round up all these illegals. I said, well, no, you don't need to round up all the illegals. You may want to round up all the folks who are not authorized to work, and there's a distinction. And let me explain. Someone who comes over here as a refugee, he can apply for a work authorization card while his case is pending in court. Now he's work authorized, but he's illegal. He came in illegal. Until the judge says he's no longer illegal, then he remains illegal, but he's in criminal court. So he has work authorization. He can go work at any place as an illegal alien or immigrant. The other guy who's here legal, the student, he's not authorized to work in the United States. And so when immigration comes around and checks your business and say, hey, listen, there's Leon guy who's here as a student, he's not authorized to work. Well, you've got some problems here. You've got some problems. So it kind of creates a little bit of a understanding of who's here legal and not legal. So that's kind of a thing where it's not upon you to determine whether or not this guy who's from South Africa speaking funny, whether or not it's legal or not legal. I think your job is just to kind of treat this guy neighborly, and if he's in need and you feel led to help this guy, you help the guy. You're not necessarily going to hide the guy from the government, because the government is the government and they need to do what they do. So you can still have a mutual respect for what the government needs to do as far as enforcing their laws. But as you are not deputized in order to help them enforce their laws, if that makes sense, and say, hey, I've got this Leon guy by the arm, you better come now and, before he slips away.
So as a business owner, is there anything beyond the I-9 that we need to keep on record if we were visited by the ICE?
So that's kind of a separate conversation just on the I-9 situation. I tell people, if a guy gives you a work card, it's not your job to kind of hold it up in the sky and say, well, I don't know, this looks legal or doesn't look, this looks like a manufactured work card that I got in Southwest Boulevard, I don't know. No, the I-9 is really just one of those documents that the inquiry stops with regards to a checklist of specimen documents that you need to verify employment on. And that's where the inquiry stops, whether or not the guy speaks with a funny accent and whether or not the guy speaks, you don't know if he's from Guatemala or Mexico. I get that oftentimes. Like, man, there's a bunch of illegals that are mowing my yard. I say, no, they're probably not illegal. They probably have H-2B visas or, or whatever the case may be. Just because they speak funny doesn't mean that they're illegal. But from an I-9 point of view, you just keep records. The I-9 is pretty clear about what you need, kind of documents you need to keep in support of that. And when immigration comes and say, hey, this card that you have is false. All right, well, thanks for telling me. I guess now that you tell me, we now know, but you wouldn't have otherwise had reason to know.
So it's not our responsibility to make sure that identification is valid or not?
There is specimens that are given on USCIS's website, on the I-9 employee handbook, that gives you a specimen. And if it doesn't match the specimen, I guess you can be curious about it. Because, I still have my old work authorization card, and back in the INS days, the most difficult thing about that application was to get your head kind of looking somewhere, because they had to take a picture with this angle and that angle, right? So if I give you that card today and it's laminated, you're like, this thing doesn't look right. But anyway.
How does the gospel affect our response to immigration?
I think the way that I see where I'm at and where God has led me is we all have a platform, whether or not you're in the landscaping business, the McDonald's business, the IT business. God has given me a platform to build his kingdom. He says, seek first my kingdom and everything else will be given to you. Well, I was still finding some other ways to be doing until I found this platform that he has created for me to reach people from all over the world. And I'm sitting in Kansas City. A lot of my colleagues like, how do you do immigration out of Kansas City? It's like, well, there's some people with a funny accent like myself who live here, but not that I necessarily represent all the people in Kansas City with him. But to answer your question, I think utilizing immigration as a platform, you have an ability to share the gospel in helping people through probably one of the toughest times in their lives. This is a tough decision. It gets tougher as you get older and as you get more vested in your country. For the younger ones, it's easy because they roll with the punches. But you get to represent not only people from all over the world, but also have an impact with them. You follow along with them in their journey, and we have from the day that we got started, I asked God. I was like, man, listen, if I'm going to go out on my own, I don't know where the business is going to come from, and you're going to need to provide, and which He has, and He just hasn't stopped, which speaks of His faithfulness. But that platform has just been great to help people who have extraordinary talents, executives that are coming over here and moving to their Houston office from France, or superstar athletes, to some of the women who came over here on a promise from an American that life is going to be better, only to come over here to be abused, to people who come over here on a refugee status, either it be from Africa or other parts of the world. And you get the whole gambit. And we get the platform sharing the gospel to these people in whatever level they are. Whether or not they are desperate as a refugee, or whether or not this is a kind of nice to have, for some other people who are seeking for global citizenship.
Well, that's going to conclude our conversation. Can we give him a warm hand for that amazing talk? And we're going to reserve a little bit of time for some Q&A. So if anybody has any questions that you'd like to ask him, go ahead and raise your hand, and Roland will come over and bring the microphone.
You can just speak right into it.
I think I remember previously when we heard you, that you also do your work in other countries. Is that still the case?
Yes. So my partner is Hugo. So I'm the Versfeld from Versfeld and Hugo. When I started up my firm here, we always kept in contact. And so him and I graduated from the University in Pretoria, and he immigrated to Australia. And so we formed a partnership wherein we help people immigrate, because at the time, a lot of people from South Africa were leaving either to go to the UK. America was kind of third on the list, but Australia was a big destination. And so we had a client, a big client, a shared client, doing immigration to Australia and to the US. So we do immigration to Australia, which Etienne does. And then we have further partnered with another guy who was in our law school, J.P. Breitenbach, who does all of our immigration to South Africa and to the UK. This year, we have brought online a Spanish component to help also with immigration to Spain as a footprint to get into the European Union. And that kind of came from a big petroleum company that we represent out of Houston, a French-based, that has had a need for this. And then last but not least, obviously Canada, we have an immigration agent that helps us with that. And this has become only helpful from some of the bigger clients that we represent, the corporate clients. They have various different branches someplace. Sometimes it would be helpful for us to have the guy maybe move to Canada with the objective to come to America, spend 12 months in Canada, and then he qualifies for a visa that he would need in order to come to America, or vice versa. So it's been helpful, and it's also been helpful where previously, we weren't able to kind of service those clients because we didn't provide that service, and we would need to go find someone reputable to do that. In fact, there's a big Fortune 100 company right out here in Overland Park that is one of our bigger clients, that has places all over the world, in Salvador and a lot of parts in Europe, and that's kind of been one of those benefits to service them. Yeah. And it's always great also just compare notes. I mean, Etienne and I from time to time talk about the challenges that I face in my practice, and it's almost the same of the challenges that he's facing in his practice. So dealing with the federal government, it seems like there is a rule that, or thread that kind of goes through.
I enjoyed your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was going to ask, you talked about how you have a platform for sharing the gospel
Yes.
with your clients and such. And I know, I was in the business world for about 15 years or so, and it's always really tricky. Yeah, I can live out my faith, but actually saying words and sharing the gospel is a challenging thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I was interested how you find opportunities to actually speak words to encourage someone.
I open up my phone only here because I want to reference, and you're right. I mean, you don't want Jesus didn't come and speak to thousands of people and just said, all right, look, if you don't turn, you're going to burn, and that's it, right? He always used some kind of an analogy or a story that he told. And so what I have done is, during the journey, there will always be an opportunity to kind of, just share a little bit. But what I've done is just on a very subtle basis, I have put 3 scriptures at the bottom of my email. And I don't say what the scripture says, so that if someone is interested, they will actually go pick up a Bible, which is the first step. Second step, they will go find this citation, and then they will go read what it says. And I have had quite a few people who've gone through some tough times during this immigration journey that has come to me and say, hey, thank you so much for this scripture that you have at the bottom of your email. I'm not a believer, but I read that and it meant so much to me, especially in the time that I'm at right now. In fact, I had a colleague out of St. Louis that referred me some business the other day. He called me and he said, hey, listen, I just wanted to introduce myself. Thank you so much for taking care of our clients. And he wanted to pray with me. He said, you've got a scripture. Can we pray for our clients? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So, you find some subtle ways. And I say that I think the best way is always just to kind of lean upon the Holy Spirit. He will always kind of guide you along what to say and what not to say, and give the opportunity to do so. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a question. I think a lot of us, or myself maybe, have an interest in the whole immigration issue simply because of the turmoil that's going on in our culture right now. It sounds like your role is more in the area of trying to help people through the system and help them to get where they need to be and be able to do what they need to do. Can you speak at all in your experience to situations that are going on in the culture? Say, for example, in Springfield, Ohio, where the community is overrun with Haitians, and they don't want them there. They were forced to receive them there, or just in general, the whole idea that that one party has wanted to bring. It seems like they wanted to bring as many people as possible to help their vote count. Those kind of issues that are continually set before us.
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is that, each administration brings with it its own divisiveness. You talked about the kids in cages drama that happened, and now you have this apparent influx of immigrants that are going to vote. But all of this is still out of my hands, out of your hands. What the sensational media would like to do is to go exploit certain situations in order to centralize that. So that's the first thing I would say. But it doesn't take away boots on the ground when you are in Ohio and all of a sudden you have neighbors that now all of a sudden is overrunning town, especially when it's a small town like that. And for them to assimilate to what you are doing should be the case, but then it becomes the opposite. So that then becomes very challenging for you and for us as Christians on how do we then be neighborly to someone who is not reciprocating the neighborlessness. And that is something that is totally out of our hands, where we would need to lean upon our government officials, elected officials, to say, listen here, this is just not right. I mean, for a variety of reasons, irrespective of if they're Haitians, South Africans, or Venezuelans. The long and the short of it is that it's just, it's like someone was saying, the Titanic is sinking and I've got this rafter. This rafter is only going to seat so many people. As much as I would like to help everybody that is drowning onto this rafter, if I add more people to this raft, all of us is going to drown. And I'm not saying that that's a decision that you or I need to make. That's a decision that the government needs to make, and we need to make sure that we have our voices heard, where those elected officials don't put us in situations like that, where it creates divisiveness, where it creates this untenable situation where it's taking up resources that is just not sustainable anymore. So that's kind of what I would say about that.
Last question. Anybody else?
We've got about a minute left, so the question is that right?
Yes, sir.
In your office, you have a nice little plaque in there I saw the other day, a special day in your life. Can you tell them about that with the American flag?
Oh, so thank you, David. In 2008, I had the privilege to become a naturalized citizen. One of our congressmen, Sam Graves, was kind enough to reach out to, there's a guy apparently who's in charge of the flags that are flying over the Capitol in various different. So that guy got me the flag that was flying over the Capitol the day I became a citizen. So I've got his certificate, that the authentication of that, along with my naturalization certificate and the actual flag that was flying. So it was a very special day. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. And just before Eric comes up, could you give us any final advice to us as we head out of here today in regard to immigration? Closing remarks?
I would just say on immigration, sure, I would say each of us have a unique platform. We have a guy in our Bible study who drives limos. And it's like, okay, how are you gonna spread the gospel or build kingdom driving limos? This guy drives. Everybody comes in town. Mick Jagger, Celine Dion, all these. Can you imagine having a platform like that? And not that you get in the car and you've got a captive audience but he has this subtle way and he's grown his business. Each of us have a unique way and a unique platform to spread the gospel. And if you really kind of think about this is the way that you're going to be able to build your kingdom, God has given you a unique platform to build his kingdom. And I cannot do what Jim does. He cannot do what I do. But God has given me a unique platform. From an immigration point of view, I would not be deterred by the divisiveness that we currently have from the media and from the political situation. I would just say we need to look at what God has asked us to do as it relates to one another and have that relationship with one another. And sometimes it's going to be difficult because of the influences and how people perceive things and how they want to indoctrinate you with things. But I would say that be friendly to your fellow immigrant who speaks with an accent.
Thank you, Leo.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bronson.
Thank you.
Soon, you have the-